All right, everybody, we're about to do a live. I was supposed to be on Dr. Sarah's page. Unfortunately, I'm having trouble logging in. So we're just waiting on Dr. Sarah to join, and then we'll get started. We're just basically talking about my overall health journey, having a heart attack, not age of 35, but 33 years old. So hopefully Dr. Sarah is able to join me. We'll be talking deep about the cause of a heart disease and other root cause issues. So let me get Dr. Sarah on. Go. All right. Accept.
Hey,
There you go. How are
it
you?
worked. Good. How are
Doing
you?
very well. I don't know what happened there. I kept pressing accept and nothing was going through.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I've given up on trying to understand those things. I just normally VPN is the problem
Oh,
on my
really?
end, but I had
Okay.
it disabled, so it's fine. I'm glad we're able to do this.
Yeah,
Hi.
absolutely. How are you?
Good. I'm so happy to finally talk to you.
Yeah, it's an honor, and it's an honor to be on your, well, it was supposed to be on your live, but, well, it doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't matter. Shows up on both our feeds at the same time. I will try
Absolutely.
to, I'll remind you at the end. I'm gonna try and have you like download it so that I can also post it on my YouTube channel because I think this is such an important topic. So okay, we're good. So let me just set the stage a little bit. I wanted to talk to you because I remember on your bio it said that you had a heart attack at a very young age, and I thought that that was very interesting and how that affected you on your journey towards health. So if you can introduce yourself just a little bit, just so that my audience has that little bio, and then from there we'll dive a little bit deeper into the way your views shifted, especially towards cardiovascular health. Okay?
Absolutely. My name is Dr. John Kim. I'm a functional medicine pharmacist, having 16 years of clinical experience so far, specializing in root cause medicine and looking at different aspects of heart disease, from hormonal dysfunction to gut health to immune imbalancing that I see a lot in patients, especially dealing with Lyme's, mold issues, and such. So I have a very vast amount of topics I cover in dealing with that because a lot of times, practitioners end up having to hyper focus on gut health and such, but when you look at the whole scheme of everything, leaky gut actually causes cardiovascular issues. So we have to look at the entire body. You
Yeah.
can't be just specialized in one aspect of it, which is fine. But when you look at the overall root cause issue, everything is interconnected, just as our creator had made to be. So it's all about the balance.
Love it. So can you share a little bit about your personal health journey and how that influenced any change in the way that you look at the your approach to health overall?
Yeah, well, I am not a carnivore. let's
Okay.
put that clear. I'm more of
It's
a
okay.
yeah, it's okay. I'm a paleo based. But when I was actually going through my own health journey back in 2015 to 2017, I was basically on a mitochondrial supporting diet. That's what was termed by Dr. Ed Kane. So mitochondrial supporting diet is basically ketogenic. And when you look at the overall cellular regeneration and mitochondrial function aspect of it, keto makes a lot of sense in doing these things. So that was basically my overall diet that I was actually following through that helped a lot into my recovery. So what had happened back in 2015 at a tender age of 33 years old, it wasn't 35, 33.
Oh, 33.
33.
Okay, I thought it was okay.
No, it's fine. You wrote 35. I was like, I have to make that clear. So it's 33 years old. I just got back from my friend's wedding. 3 days later, I was having a heartburn, which I thought was a heartburn, led to having a intense pain around my, just middle of my chest. Nothing more in terms of anything related to heart things, nothing. I didn't have a shortness of breath, no sweating, nothing else. So it wasn't a classical heart attack picture, but that evening when I was sleeping, I just woke up with a sharp shooting pain down to my left arm. And I was like, this is something going on right now. And like an idiot, instead of going to the ER, I just went back to sleep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went back to sleep. I woke up, went to work, had to do a presentation at a clinic, and then afterwards, I'm just like, the chest pain is still lingering around. I don't know what's going on. So I went to the urgent care center, and they did an EKG, and the urgent care doctor just ran running into the exam room that I was at, and she's like, "You're having a heart attack at this point. We have to call the ambulance." So that was it. So I was sent to the ER.
Wow.
And even the cardiologist, when they were doing
Yeah.
consult,
Yeah.
they're like, "You don't have a heart attack. Your troponin level is less than 1. I think you have a pericarditis." So they did all the blood work. Obviously, troponin level came back, nothing going on, right? You should have a high level troponin level and such. There was nothing classical about this particular case, except for just the minor, except for chest pain that was lingering around for 48 hours. And then when they did the echo, my left ventricle wasn't pumping correctly. So that's when they decided to bring me to the cath lab, and then they found that I had an 85% blockage in the left anterior descending artery, LAD.
Gotcha.
So instead of actually just letting that go, they ended up having to put a stent in. So I was basically catheterized and then put into the cardiac ICU unit for 4 days. And I was basically a heart patient. I was just a lot of things running in my mind. I'm like, how this could be. I thought I had lived a very healthy life, which I thought I was healthy. Right? Because you end up even if you do go through this whole functional medicine training, right? You learn all these things, but unless you really dive into taking care of your own health, you don't know what's really happening until you get that oh shit moment. And I had my oh shit moment there. Yeah.
Okay, so is that when you started the paleo keto type diet, or were you doing it already and playing around with it, and then you became a little bit more serious about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So 6 months before that actually happened, I had really bad indigestion issues, and my goodness, before that I had severe cystic acne everywhere, a lot of gut issues to begin with. So I ended up having to do a food sensitivity testing, which I don't really recommend anymore. Yeah. But I found out that I had gluten sensitivity and casein, and so I got rid of majority of the things and just stuck with paleo at that point in time. Symptoms started to improve. I actually shed a lot of weight just going through paleo. I think I lost about 25 pounds in the 4-week period because I was so inflamed. Right. That's actually, I think that's a very common thing with people transitioning into carnivore anyway, because all that inflammation lead into having extra water intracellularly. True. So you start to lose a lot of weight, and that's what happened. I started to exercise more and such, and so I thought I was getting to a best shape in my life, and also just heart attack actually happening, 3 to 4 days in ICU unit, and then coming back home, just sitting on a couch, and then wondering like, what happened? Like I thought I was having a good life and such, and so you get to wonder, like you want to now at that point in time, you want to find out what the overall root cause issue is. So I reached out to my great friend, Dr. Kristen Gedrick. She just looked at me. She's like, I think you have Lyme disease. I'm like, I don't think that's the case. Lyme? So yeah, Lyme. So we did some blood work, and then I was found to have Bartonella infection on top of toxic mold, parasites, and mycoplasma pneumonia and Epstein-Barr. So when you look at the overall causation of heart disease, I mentioned about gut health. Well, when you're dealing with leaky gut issues and having to have all these inflammatory cytokines coming through within your gut and macrophages, and you have a oxidation of the fat, right? That's the causation of the heart disease to begin with right there. Well, when you end up having to escalate even higher over the years, on top of the fact that when you have toxic mold, it actually increases cholesterol production within the liver, right? So we don't really realize that toxins, environmental toxins, causing heart disease. That's one. Second matter is that you're dealing with a Bartonella infection, which is which is called cat scratch fever, which can be getting from flea bites, tick bites, and such. And
Okay.
that can actually cause endothelial damage
Right.
within the artery. And so you
Right.
have a perfect storm to cause a atherosclerotic plaque buildup and then potentially heart attack from occurring.
And did you get the reading for the blockage? Was that was not through a CAT scan, right? They actually went in there.
Oh yeah, they actually went in.
They actually went in there.
Yeah.
So have you done a CAT scan since, and would you recommend that?
You know, I actually asked about that to my doctor. Now, remind you, it's been what, 8 years now, right? 8 years
Right.
already. So annually, I end up having to go for a stress test.
Okay.
And checking on these things. I also look at a full lipid panel.
Okay.
I do end up having to have an argument with my cardiologist about dipping my LDL too low. We going back and forth. I mean, she wants to drop it below 100. I'm like, oh, that's not happening. That is definitely not happening.
Right.
You're not killing my testosterone level right now. That's one thing that's going to protect my heart.
Right.
And you're not doing that. And then she's suggesting about PCSK9 injectables like Repatha, which is also very detrimental to your neurological function to begin with. So we argue a lot.
That's yeah, I mean, I talk about this with my students, with my clients. Even, I mean, I get clients all the time that like they understand that a carnivore diet or an ancestral diet, that they want to do that. They're not afraid of the fat. They're not afraid of this way of eating. And then they go to see, within functional medicine, there's such a strong push towards plant-based and this whole basic narrative. And so even when they go to see their functional medicine practitioners or any other doctor, primary care physician, you know, they just hear so much conflicting information, and then they'll sending me emails. It's like, this is so frustrating. You know, it's hard enough to change my diet and to eat this way, and to feel like maybe that's not 100%, like not everybody agrees that that's the best way to do. So it's very confusing for people. You know, it's already taking a lot of mental bandwidth to focus on resisting the carbs, resisting the sugars and the addictive foods. And then you have all of these authority figures telling you, no, like meat is inflammatory, you know, or LDL, your LDL is too high. And that's why I'm so excited that we're talking about this specific aspect. Like let's do a deeper dive into, you know, into the LDL, into the causes of heart disease. First of all, 75% of patients who have a heart attack have normal LDL cholesterol. It's not flagged as high. And so we already know that. We also know that 73% of those who have heart attacks have disturbances in their blood sugar, meaning they have blood sugar imbalances. So why aren't we focusing on that first and foremost, you know, as opposed to trying to target the LDL, right?
Yeah. It's, well, as we all know, medicine has been hijacked by the special interest groups. I've seen this over the last 16 years of my practice, as well as, you know, traveling down to Washington, D.C., talking to different lawmakers. You know, I'm not as active at this point in time, but before the pandemic, before 2020,
yeah,
at least 3 to 4 times a year, I would go down to Washington, D.C., talking to lawmakers about, you know, medicine, about accessibility of certain specialty medication for patients, because you have 3-letter agencies getting involved, trying to dictate what the patient should be using. Right? That's not what we want here. We want overall freedom. We want people to make the right choices. If you want to do, you know, you want to take the statins, do you, right? But if you could actually manage it without the statins, if you could actually do things naturally, that's what we want. So going back in terms of why this is a case is the fact that it's been the overall, and this happens to be the case in pharmacy school as well. And luckily, the pharmacy school I went to, Rutgers University, we had great professors to make us question about studies, who the published author was, who funded the studies, all these things. And so we had a very much of a critical thinking skill that we were bred into. So that's the thing. And a lot of times when you actually have prescribers just working through the overall motion of medicine, looking at people from left and right, you end up having to just looking at key numbers, which is the LDL, HDL, and the triglyceride. I think those are three things I end up having to mainly focus on a lot of times. And then they end up having to say, oh, well, you just need some statins, or you need some fenofibrate, or you need some fish oil here and there. But if you look at the overall causation of the heart disease itself and looking at the lipid, you have to look at the full lipid breakdown, ApoB, what the overall calcium score, even calcium score in general, is not very indicative of anything else. So, you shouldn't be hyper focused on that particular number. But main thing you have to look at is how's that person's diet. What is his or her A1C level? That is a very good indication in terms of how well that person is able to control their blood sugar to begin with. And then on top of looking at other cardiac inflammatory markers, and as well as looking at, I think HDL is a great number to looking at these days. That's one thing that I would recommend. So I had a good discussion with my friend yesterday. And she's like, well, I have a total cholesterol level of 250. I'm like, okay. So, and she's less than 30 years old. And I was like, well, what is your HDL? Right. 660. And then how's your triglyceride level? 87. I'm like, you don't have to worry about anything, right?
Not bad at all.
You don't, not bad at all. Because even if you're looking at, I don't know if you remember that particular study, that was and I'm South Korean. And this is a really good example in terms of what South Korea actually had done. They looked at 12 million South Koreans looking at the total cholesterol level and then the overall data in terms of longevity. They found that people who actually have high total cholesterol level of above 200 live longer. Okay, this is one of the key things: live longer compared to people who actually have low total cholesterol. Even when you're looking at LDL level, the quality of life aspect of it is piss poor, right? So these are things that we have to looking at. It's not the lipid dummy, it's the sugar, it's the overall inflammation. And if you're looking at the overall epigenetic issues as well, sleeping, how they're able to manage the overall toxicity level, how they're eating, right? These are key things that they should be looking at. If the person is sleeping less than 6 hours a day, they have a high indication of actually have a very poor glucose management. Well, that is one of the key things you have to be looking at these things. How's that person's mental health, stress response, right? Are they exercising well? If they do exercise, how well are they able to recover, right? So all these things that they have to looking at. So I'm a big supporter of using heart rate variability and looking at the recovery aspect of it, how well the person's sleeping. Because even looking at heart rate variability, and that was one of the key things that I used after having my heart attack. I had a great trainer. He actually put me on something called an omega wave, which is very much of it is a very early prototype of heart rate variability. And he checked my neurological function as well as the recovery rate that I actually had obtained the night before. And then having to customize my overall workout. And so certain days I'm like, John, you're not meant to work out at this point in time. Let's do some light recovery stretching and such. But those are the key things that really helped me to recover my cardiac issue that I was dealing with.
It's so funny how going with LDL is bad and let's just drop that, just focusing on that narrative allows the pharmaceutical companies to make billions of dollars from prescribing all kinds of drugs to lower it, right? And also allows the food companies to still put that heart healthy claim on Honey Nut Cheerios, right?
Don't tell me.
And come up with the food compass that tells you that, what is it? The Fruit Loops are healthier and better for you than steak and eggs. So you've got two conglomerates that are making billions of dollars that can continue to make profit if everybody just believed this idea that it's about the fat, it's about LDL. And to tell the people and telling people what we're talking about right now and telling them, don't worry about the LDL. That's such, it's a little bit more complex than just that one number, and it's really actually the carbs and the sugars and your blood sugar going with that narrative means that people aren't going to run to their doctor to get that statin,
Absolutely.
right? You know, so there's less profit there, and they're going to continue to eat all of the junk and the processed food that have all the health claims on them, which is like 90% of processed food, right? Not even like, I mean, it's all processed, but like it's sold as health foods, you know, all of the cereals, all of the bars, the health bars, all of those things rely on you not realizing how bad consuming those carbohydrates actually are for you. So this is why people are so confused. You know, there's just too much money being pumped in having you not understand the basic cause of heart disease.
Yeah. You know, even with the food industry right now and the way that the whole wave of, you know, the whole term keto is getting popular these days, you know, you see keto, the word keto being popped up on food packages all over. I mean, if you go to Costco, that's the number one thing that I see. You know, sugar-filled snacks end up having to say keto on it. Or I think there was one of the bread company filled with chemicals and bromide and such. And then the first ingredient that says wheat in it,
yeah,
but then it was labeled as keto.
Yeah.
So this
Or
is the
gluten, wheat gluten. I've seen those breads. First ingredient is gluten, and it's labeled as keto.
Keto. So that's the thing. And so this is why I don't sometimes really trust the whole term certified organic, because anybody could pay a lot of money to get that word certified organic stamped onto a food label. So you have to look at, you know, where everything is sourced, you know, are they been hijacked by the big companies? And these are things. And even looking at the natural food and natural supplement world right now, Nestle, for instance, owns like 3 different supplement companies at this point. And I've seen, you know, I do use Pure Encapsulation. Pure Encapsulation is one company that's been bought by Nestle.
No, I recommend that all the time.
Yeah, they're bought up by Nestle. Douglas Lab is owned by Nestle, right? So all these supplement companies are being bought out. And the issue is that the actual quality of it actually goes down. Naked Juice is another company. You know, it's been very popular back in my early 2000s, but they got bought up by Coca-Cola. If you look at the overall packaging, it's packed with sugar. So why this is so important is that you have to be, as a consumer, to be their own best doctor, to look at the overall labels, to protect themselves and such. Because if you don't, you're just going to be completely fooled, because it's easy to be fooled and because it's so confusing. And the second thing is that the lobbying groups out there, right, they're spending billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars in trying to get things pushed. You know, why is there, for instance, why is it the United States still utilizing high fructose corn syrup, right, when majority of countries in Europe end up having to ban it, right?
Yeah. Because we subsidize it. That's why the government actually subsidizes corn.
Yeah, that's the overall things, and as a result, we are just ingesting sugar left and right. And I was one of the generation, right? One of the favorite cereal that I had when I was growing up was Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That was my overall thing, because that's how we grew up. Because what they do, they market as being the healthiest breakfast possible.
We fell for it. We all did. Our parents fell for it. We fell for it. I grew up eating cereal. You know, it's really coming right now. I feel like we used to have so much respect for the science, and I still, you know, I'm a scientist. You know, I'm a big nerd, and I think it's something that more people need in their lives. But at the same time, the large companies have figured out that if you fund enough studies that come out of prestigious universities, now it becomes official science, and nobody from the left or the right will ever question a study that came out of Harvard, right, or Yale or Stanford. And unfortunately, farmers and people who are producing healthy, organic, good food for us, they don't have that profit margin that junk food companies that are literally dealing with drugs, you know, those foods have been shown to activate our dopamine system, similar to hard drugs. So yeah, when you're dealing with drugs, quote unquote, being a drug dealer, you can make a ton of profit. You can make a lot of money, and they are. And everybody's addicted, and so that even further promotes their profits. And so now they have the ability to pump a lot more money shaping just one narrative, which is why we know that junk food companies spend 11 times on nutrition research than the NIH, the National Institutes for Health. So you can't talk anymore about the science when there's an imbalance in the funding source, because when you have a hypothesis or a certain bias that, you know, just counting calories is enough, and you're giving a lot of money to certain researchers to study that, then the way that you formulate your study, the hypothesis, is going to be different than if your hypothesis is not influenced by your funding source. Absolutely. Right?
Yep.
And so it's like we're climbing the mountain, and it's the wrong mountain, right? And it's like 95% of nutrition research is literally just trash, which is, I got this from Paul Saladino, and I think that was a great thing that he was saying years ago. He started saying that, which is a mountain of trash is still trash. And he's so right. Just because we have all of these studies pumped out on nutrition, but they're all coming from one source, it doesn't make it true, right? And that's intentional. That is a very intentional tactic that the food companies and even the pharmaceutical companies do. Let's flood the academic world with our funded studies so that now we can say, oh, look at the totality of evidence. But it's all epidemiology. It's all using the wrong hypotheses. It's all inherently biased. So it is a mountain of trash.
It is, and this is what we experienced in the last 3 years in terms of the overall media, with all the false information they actually have been pushing out about natural immunity and such. I mean, we're kind of going out of tangency from the overall topic.
Trouble. I'm still traumatized. Don't get me in trouble.
Right. No, but looking at this right now, the overall media end up having to be, you're showcasing the same information from everywhere else. And then even my parents, right? They're like, this is what they're saying in the media at this point. This has to be true.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah. I mean, we could go in depth about these things, but one thing that we have to realize is that what you see, just don't believe, but also do your own research and finding out what the overall truth is, right? Find the right group of people within your tribe to support you, and then getting you to the healthier you're looking for. And that's the key things. Yeah. And don't rely on drugs. I mean, one of the things, and I'm not telling you, if you had a heart attack and if you have to be on a statin for a short period of time, that's a must, right? I'm not telling you not to take your drugs, but that's something that has to be looked into. So overall, risk and benefit. But when you're taking a statin drug, for instance, a nice way to kind of move into the drug portion of it, statins, right? You're talking about Lipitor, you're talking about Zocor, all these particular drugs, which have been sold for trillions of dollars for it at this point in time. They do have a high amount of inherent risk that comes into play. Well, the first thing will be, it does cause mitochondrial dysfunction, right? You have CoQ10 being depleted because CoQ10 has to be produced within the whole lipid profile of your cholesterol cascade as well. And the second thing is that it also disrupts the overall gut microbiome. So you need good gut to help to control your immune system and such, including the fact that your vitamin K2 level gets depleted by taking statin drugs. Right? So you have multiple issues at this point in time. Why do you need vitamin K2? Well, it protects your arterial lining of your blood vessel. Yeah. And as well as the fact that vitamin K2 also helps to chomp away on the calcification of your arteries, right? And then when you add in vitamin D3, well, the vitamin D3 is going to help to reabsorb that into your bones. So it's a natural means that we already produce by having a good gut bacteria. But what are we doing right now? We're eating sugary food, and it's actually causing dysbiosis, gut inflammation. On top of eating those glyphosate-filled cereal, what are you going to do? We actually, well, you're wiping out your gut flora, your overall gut intestinal lining gets leaky, right? If you have a leaky gut, you also have a leaky brain. So you have a brain inflammation going on. That could also equate to many neurological dysfunctions that patients are dealing with.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on top of the fact that cardiac issues, right? Having atherosclerotic plaque buildup at an earlier age in people like myself. And then having to now deal with the uprise of weight gain in young kids on top of diabetes, right?
Yeah.
I just cannot believe that some of the local hospitals now actually have diabetic centers and weight loss management centers for kids. It's unheard of, but this is where our overall generation is actually heading at this point in time.
Yeah.
This is also affecting people's hormone levels, the fertility levels getting lower because of that reason. I think there's a lot of pictures of toxins, but when you're looking at the overall bigger picture of what's going on with the food industry, well, it's actually causing infertility, right? So these are a lot of things that we have to look at, but people are just being fooled left and right.
Yeah, when you have the American Heart Association being really put on the map from Procter and Gamble's $1.5 million grant. You know, when you have Procter and Gamble offering this kind of money to the American Heart Association in the early 1900s, which eventually put the American Heart Association on the map, and in exchange, the American Heart Association started promoting the waste products, which were cotton seeds and cottonseed oil, as a healthier oil than its competition, which were animal fats. Like this just goes to show you where the origins of these large companies stem from and why they have any sort of influence at all. And that's because they have no problem accepting money from those food companies. Same thing with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I mean, you go to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics conference, and it's literally like an expose for all the junk food companies. They've got Coca-Cola, they've got the sugar companies there. Not only are they there with stands, they actually give presentations. The food companies, junk food companies, are actually educating dietitians. Same thing happens in the medical system. Who's offering continuing medical education credits to our physicians? Flip over. So my sister-in-law, she's a medical doctor. When we visit her in North Carolina, it's really, I do this as an exercise in comedy. I flip over the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. She has laying over everywhere, and it's like every other page is a full thing of like some new drug, and then you flip it over and then they're bashing some form of alternative medicine. Anything that doesn't require basically any reliance on drugs is something that they term as a fad or an alternative medicine, and they bash it. So they'll write those articles, and then you flip over the page and it's like a full spread of a drug advert. I mean, it's just, I mean, I think at some point you got to have some level of common sense. At some point you got to realize your patients aren't getting better. At some point, you gotta stop and ask, you know, have I been so misled and lied to? And you gotta have the courage to face the answer, because I know it doesn't feel good to realize what has been done to us. Just like it doesn't feel good to me to know that I've wasted decades of my life to becoming a dietitian and doing my licensing and the internship and then a doctorate, and it's all the wrong information. You know, it doesn't feel good to know that I'm taking no student loans on that crap, you know?
I'll give you an example. I mean, after I had my heart attack, the first meal that I got was fried chicken, tater tots, and a piece of cake and coffee on the side. No. This is what the hospital gave, right? So after getting a stent put in, right after, I was hungry. I didn't eat the entire day. They gave me fried chicken, tater tots, cake, and coffee.
I cannot believe
that.
So
this is the overall dietary plan that the hospital ended up having to give out. Why is that? It's because of the fact that there's a cost-saving measures that they have to do as well. And then you're also hiring this nutritionists or dietitians who's been in the system to be taught that these are the ways to take care of a cardiac patient.
Wow.
Right. So this is a main thing that we have to looking at. The entire system is broken. I don't think you could end up having to turn the system around. that you
No.
shouldn't be relying on a medical system, that you have to be your own best doctor to manage your own health, right? But if you keep on relying on the fact that if the government is going to save you, if the regulators is going to be end up having to teach you how to eat properly, you're absolutely wrong. And when you end up having to face your own health issue down the line, it's too late.
Yeah.
It is absolutely too late. And this is one of the key points that I end up having to preach about, is that, you know, doctor of the future is you. You got to take care of yourself.
Agreed, 100%. And, you know, this is why I'm so grateful for people like you who are sharing the right message, who have the courage, because we are being targeted by the social media companies, and the misinformation slaps on all of our posts just because we're not following the mainstream narrative, which is basically funded by those pharmaceutical and food companies. So I'm grateful for that. I wanted to ask you about what you did about your gut health. That's something that we don't really talk too much about with regards to heart disease.
So gut health, you know, one thing that I did that gave me the majority of the improvement that I saw within the first 6 months of just changing things was basically diet, right? So paleo is one of the key things that I always recommend my gut patients to do. Just getting rid of gluten, and as was casein, not talking about raw milk, but casein from pasteurized milk end up having to be the key things that you have to get rid of. Also, third thing that I would probably recommend doing, and I did at that point in time, is getting rid of oxalates. Right? Oxalates actually cause a lot of gut inflammation is one thing, but then also second, a lot of people don't talk about oxalate is that it can cause gut candida issue to get worse with oxalates getting involved. So eating all that kale, thinking that it's going to fix your gut, is actually ruining it. So main things that you want to looking at is, you know, clean meat, utilizing complex carbs. I could probably recommend doing like cauliflowers, if not utilizing like sweet potato. That was one of the key things that I loved eating. So that's one thing that I helped out. If you cannot tolerate those things, don't eat it. But this is what I did. And so
you took out the sweet potatoes, or you kept it in?
I kept it in.
Okay.
So that was one of the carbs that I ended up having to add in. And then on top of, in terms of adding in some of the higher protein that I could get, high quality protein. So, you know, ground beef ended up having to be one of the things that I would eat a lot. As well as using eating lamb, getting your organic lamb was very delicious. Chicken wise, I mean, those are things that I end up having to do. So again, high levels of protein, having to add in good fat, because good fat equates to really getting to fix your gut lining as well. I do recommend patients to utilizing phospholipids, which are coming from eggs. You get a lot of phospholipids from eggs. However, if you're using a plant-based phospholipids as well, you could extract high quality amounts of it. And there's a company called Body Bio that I use a lot. That is soy derived. However, they have a proprietary methods to get rid of the soy protein, so you don't have any soy allergies whatsoever. And so that's one of the things that I end up having to utilize.
What is that again? Can you share that again?
Sure, absolutely. There's a company called Body Bio.
Okay.
And
Body
Bio, then they actually produce liposomal phospholipids.
Okay.
So it's not about phosphatidylcholine, which we always think about phospholipids. It's a different complex of it. So phosphonethanolamine, phosphoinositol, and phosphocyanine, and phosphocholene. So the four major types. And I also add in omega-6 and omega-3. So omega-6 and omega-3, I like to look at more of a 4-to-1 ratio. Having too much omega-3 is also detrimental to your health to begin with. So you need to have a right balance between those fatty acids to support your entire gut function as well as your cell membrane. So that's basically what I did to get my gut health back after having to deal with the initial inflammation. So changing diet, adding the right fat, as well as key focus on overall toxins I was dealing with. So especially the mold toxins and environmental exposure to heavy metals, right? So those are a lot of the three things that I've done to get my gut health.
So did you do chelation therapy?
Chelation?
Yeah.
No. So one of the things about chelation, and I don't recommend chelation anymore. Here's the reason why. When you're
Okay.
using heavy chelation therapies like that, what it does is actually rips the minerals off the cell membrane. And in terms of your overall health, is determined by the cell membrane integrity. The reason being is your mitochondria is affected if your cell membrane is completely damaged. And so you do need the minerals. And when you're dealing with high inflammatory conditions, you know, B6 could be depleted, but majority of times is your minerals. So you need to replace that. So I don't recommend, sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah, like because I talk so much about, you know, mercury, heavy metal toxicity, and how the half-life of mercury is 20 years, right? It takes 20 years for half of the mercury load in your body to be detoxified naturally. So how can we get those toxins out of our bodies as quickly as possible?
Absolutely. So I don't recommend, like I said, I don't recommend doing EDTA or DMSA these days because of the, you know, damaging of the lipid bilayer of your cell membrane. What I recommend doing is using phospholipids. So why that is that when you actually when you have any toxic exposure to heavy metals or mold toxins and such, it causes a rift within the cell membrane. And so why that's so important to realize that is that we don't really conceptualize the cell membrane as what it should be, because when you're adding in the, you know, overall use of phospholipids, this is the reason why phospholipids are so important. Adding in the phospholipids actually helps to mend the rift that's actually going on the cell membrane, as well as adding in the key minerals helps to replace a lot of the toxins you're dealing with. Another thing is that PC, like using phospholipids, has been shown to pull metal off of the cell membrane and the overall cells. So that's one of the simple ways to do so. So what I do is there's a video on my page in doing safe, effective heavy metal detox. First thing you want to do is support your cell membrane utilizing phospholipids like body bioproduct that I mentioned before. Second thing is you want to use a light binder, carbon-based binders like bentonite clay, or even using, you know, things like zeolite, fulvic acid, humic acid. Those are key things that I would recommend doing. Then, and also fiber. You need good amounts of fiber to actually help to get the heavy metals out. Third, you want to do is support your liver, also your gallbladder. So especially your drainage pathway has to be opened up. If you cannot poop, well, you can't detox heavy metals. So you need to get your gut function back in order. So that's number 3. Number 4 that I recommend doing is sweating. You want to get your sweating on. So I love using far infrared sauna for patients dealing with heavy metal toxicity and getting that through. So those are the 4 key essential ways. And I do have the video on my page. I'll send it to you right after. You could probably share with your followers.
I'll share it for sure.
Yeah, so those are key effective ways to do so. One of the favorite binder that I use is called Takesumi. It's Takesumi. Is a carbonized bamboo and is a high affinity to heavy metals. Unfortunately, a lot of people may not be able to tolerate that heavy binder right off the bat. So this is the reason why you want to support the cell membrane first, use a very light binder, get your gut function in order, then start to detox by sweating and pooping things out.
Have you done the test, you know, like the provoked mercury heavy metal test?
Yes.
Have you done it and like tracked and all that kind of stuff to see has the protocol dropped your overall load of toxins?
Yeah, so I used to do that. Now, actually, some of the labs that I've used, they are more of an epigenetic testing. So these epigenetic testing is a company called IGL based out of Germany. And what they do is just doing a simple blood analysis. It actually checks for mitochondrial dysfunction, as well as a polarity between the lipid bilayers of the cells, as well as looking at the overall toxins you're exposed to, including mycotoxins and other pathogens. So this is a great test looking at. So that could be expensive. The other one that I recommend doing these days, and this is what I use a lot in my clinic, it's called total tox burden testing. Company's name is Vibrant Wellness. So it's doing a simple pee collection, urine collection, would
Mm-hmm.
break it down into looking at environmental toxins, so such as glyphosates and pesticides, followed by heavy metals, so aluminum, lead, mercury, all that, and then looking at, and then as well as looking at mycotoxins, so aflatoxin, ochratoxin. All those things are very, very important because heavy metal gets bound to mold. Okay, so when you're dealing with mold, you're also dealing with heavy metal. So you have to looking at the entirety of the scope of toxins instead of just looking at hyper-focusing on mercury alone.
Yeah, that's something that I've read a lot about, right? How if you have a candida overgrowth in your gut, which most people do have to some extent, that sometimes it's very difficult to get rid of it if you're still having heavy metals in your body. It's the theory behind it is that the candida grows to protect you from the heavy metal. It's kind of like engulfing it in order to protect your vital organs from the damaging effects of, let's say, mercury, aluminum, lead, etc. And until you excrete the toxins from your body, it's just, you're going to have a really hard time completely eliminating the candida, or just at least, bringing it back to its very small, tiny amounts it's supposed to be in your gut.
Absolutely. So that's the reason why I don't just focus on metals alone these days. I look at the entire picture. How do I get this patient's cell membrane back in order? And then followed by using the binders and then getting them properly detoxed. Because if we miss those critical steps, you're not going to be able to get toxins out intracellularly. So just kind of give you an example. When you're undergoing a toxic exposure, your cells undergo something called cell danger response. And one of the key things that the mitochondria actually does is it starts to pump out phospholipids within the cell to cause a complete lockdown on the cell membrane. As a result, any of the toxins that are inside the cell cannot get out, right?
Wow.
So when you're undergoing cell danger response and dealing with the toxin exposure, if you're just doing chelation, you're only doing extracellular aspect of it, not the intracellular things that you're looking for. So people end up having to go through chelation. Going through chelation because of that. I mean, you're going to feel worse to begin with, but you're not ideally targeting the intracellular aspect that you're dealing with. And when you're also dealing with the chelation and looking at heavy metals, patients do feel flu-like symptoms when you're pulling heavy metals out, right? And this actually can be the case with people who are losing weight too rapidly. Fat cells hold on to a lot of toxins, right? Why is that people actually have trouble losing weight? Well, when you're dealing with heavy metals and all these toxins, your fat is just basically holding on to all those crap, and you can't detox correctly because of it, resulting in inadequate weight loss issues.
Yeah. And you feel also a little miserable because as you burn some fat, some of those toxins also get released, which makes you feel a little bit worse, and that's what triggers cravings and all that kind of stuff. So you do a lot of testing, I'm assuming, right, with clients. And do you have experience in terms of people who have been doing chelation versus people who are doing your protocol, and how much faster or how much more effective either of those routes for detoxification are, like comparing one to one?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give a perfect example for myself. I mean, I've had when I had my heart attack back in 2015, I had a high levels of mercury in my blood. Probably because I was playing with mercury when I was little. Remember those mercury thermometers? I used to intentionally crack them just to get the mercury out and to play with my hands.
Ouch.
I mean, you don't know much, right? And I don't know if you remember those mercury-filled antiseptic solutions years ago. So when I was growing up in Korea,
we used to use them.
Right?
I remember using them on my own as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a little kid, when I was growing up in South Korea, my grandmother used to put these red solution that was filled with mercury on my skin all the time. So again, epigenetic exposure of all different toxins you're dealing with over the years and overall, over your lifetime can actually determine your overall health that's happening at this point in time. So just kind of give you an example, I had a very high levels of mercury, and what we utilized at that point in time was, again, phospholipids, using binders. I don't use cilantro as much anymore, but cilantro was another thing that I used, right? I don't use chlorella anymore as these days, because of the fact that depending on the company you're dealing with, chlorella has been linked to high levels of mycotoxins being some of the toxins that's in there. So I don't really recommend that either. So that's what we end up having to do. So I didn't use any chelation at that point in time when I had to do the mercury detox. Okay. And it was a substantial change. I mean, it took about 3 months to do so. So that's what it is. So, your overall chelation can be short or long depending on how and what you utilize to do that, but also the state of your health. If you are severely sick from all the co-infections and other things that you're dealing with, especially cardiac issues, you got to do things very, very slowly, right? I'm quite sure that atherosclerotic plaque is having some issue dealing with heavy metal exposure as well. So you don't want to start pulling things out too rapidly. Gradual approach, supporting the cells. And actually, I forgot to mention about using seed oils, right? Damage the cell membranes.
Yeah.
All right, let's just repeat that again. Using seed oils like canola, grapeseed oil, all these things can actually damage cell membranes.
Basically, the oils that the American Heart Association recommends.
Yes, it destabilizes your cell membrane. Okay.
Isn't that wild? Yeah. That the American Heart Association recommends the very oils that are one of the biggest triggers for heart disease.
It does. It does. And so, I found this website. I think I should share this part. I found this website yesterday. My friend actually shared it to me. There's a website called localfats.com. Okay. I know you live in Florida, and that particular website gives you a full listing of real food restaurants that do not use inflammatory oils. And Florida, surprisingly, filled with restaurants that do not use inflammatory oils.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
That's good.
I did not know that.
Take a look at the website. I'll message you the link as well.
We generally don't go to the restaurants anymore because I feel like it's awful. Anywhere we go, Yeah.
So the website is called localfats.com, and it gives you a full list of restaurants that do not use inflammatory oils. Instead, they use tallow and butter to cook their food.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Animal fat helps with the cell membrane. So one of the key things that I recommend to do anytime patients dealing with chronic illness is to change their overall diet and using more of a mitochondrial supporting diet, adding in high amounts of protein and fat, right? Along with utilizing some of the vegetables and such to support the microbiome. And I know you probably have different thoughts on that, but this is what we do, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going full carnivore at this point in time, but at least to support the cell membrane, the overall protein synthesis, as well as to keeping a clean diet to get things. I mean, carnivore is the ultimate elimination diet, right? I'm basically controlling the overexposure we're dealing with in terms of toxins.
So when I first started digging into carnivore diet, and I used to believe that, it's the ultimate elimination diet, and obviously it helps so many people figure out what their food sensitivities were. And then as I learned more and more, about our digestive system, our stomach pH, the fact that we have almost no cecum to speak of, just like all carnivores, and actually digging into the what's the field, paleoanthropology, I believe, studies, it became very clear that we are hyper carnivores, not just carnivores. Like for 99.99% of our existence as a species here on Earth, we evolved during an ice age where we did not have access to plant foods, and even if we did, maybe like one month out of the year, we wouldn't, it was like a fallback food. And so over time, my views have evolved surrounding fiber, plant foods, and I have come to believe that it is, you know, a carnivore diet is our species specific diet. It is what made us human. And then when you go and you look at 10,000 years ago, when the agricultural revolution happened, right, and we started eating more plants, how our skeletons deteriorated, started having misalignment in the teeth, our brains started shrinking in size. So I don't think, obviously, that having broccoli is the worst thing in the world compared to what people are eating, you know, and if that keeps you sane and you don't have a reason to go beyond that, then, you know, that's fine. It's not dogma. It's just that I just share, you know, my views, my opinions on what the optimal human diet is. And I do think that it is our species specific diet. And with the thing is, I think that with functional medicine that I see a lot is there's a lot of emphasis on fiber because of the microbiome, right, and the probiotics. And I'll be the first to admit that we really still, there's so much we still don't know about the microbiome. There's still so much we really don't understand about, okay, what is the optimal microbiome, right? Because people that we're studying, everybody's eating carbs, everybody's eating plants, everybody's eating fiber. How many people really are real carnivores in this day and age? And are they actually being included in the studies? They're not, you know? So we have such an incomplete understanding of the microbiome, and this is why you know, because I get a lot of those questions, right? Like, what about cholesterol? What about fiber and all that? So this is something I get asked all the time, and my answer is always, we've barely scratched the surface of what an optimal microbiome actually looks like. We barely know anything of the sheer amount of bacterial strains that we're supposed to have, but obviously that is a huge element in health or disease, just by looking at the fecal microbiota transplants and the sheer things that are happening. I mean, people reverse gray hair, people have hair loss reversed, people lose weight or cure schizophrenia or, you know, depression, things that weren't even the intended reason for the FMT transfer, but they happen as a side effect. So yeah, I do believe it's like, it is what determines pretty much everything in our health.
No, it is. I mean, if you're looking at the ancestral aspect of it, I mean, even for me, I mean, South Koreans, actually, if you're looking at the ancestral, we're Mongolians actually, right? So if you look at Mongols and they're complete carnivores actually. If you're looking at what they had done in terms of complete conquering all aspects of the west side of the continent, looking at up to Turkey to up to, you know, eastern part of Europe, what they used to travel was freeze-dried meat, right? And then they would, you know, get to an area, they end up having to make an entire stew out of it, and then having to do so. They didn't really add any, you know, vegetable, because if you end up having to travel during the winter, that's not really available. However, when you're looking at meat and fat, that would end up having to feed a lot of their soldiers very well, right? Even if you're looking at Eskimos, right, in terms of what they have now still doing. So why that's important is that, and I'm a strong believer in ancestral diet. Some people may not. I'm a strong believer in that, because depending on your overall epigenetic profile and where you came from, that particular diet would end up having to suit better, right? So if I've done complete vegan for 3 months, I felt lousy, right? So I ended up having to add in different mixtures, meat and such, higher amounts of meat, and then, you know, a little bit of carb, but that's what I've been doing. But then I've had one client, this is a very interesting part, and the very interesting part in terms of how and where you live changes your overall disease expression where you come from. So I have a client who's an Iraqi refugee. She came to the United States when she was 7 years old, excuse me. 5 years later, she ended up having to develop Crohn's disease, right? 5 years. So one of the key things I was asking about was, what do you eat and such? And she was eating high amounts of kale, so oxalates, which is also ripping her stomach to begin with. And she was mainly doing vegan. And
Yeah.
I was asked her why that was the case. Because, well, this is what my gastro recommended me to deal with the Crohn's disease. And I was just shaking my head. I was just like, well, what is your overall background? I was like, Iraqi. Well, they were bedwomen's, right? If you're looking at bedwomen's, they didn't really.
Say that again. They were what?
Bedouins. So they were basically gypsies, like Middle Eastern
Oh,
gypsies, basically.
yeah. Okay.
But if you're looking at the overall
Oh,
diet, they didn't really rely
Bedouis.
on.
Right. Sorry. I know in Arabic. I'm actually from Lebanon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Bedou. Yeah.
So,
Got it now.
sorry. So if you're looking at the overall their diet, they didn't hunt for kale.
Right.
That's the key things that we have to looking at. What was their overall ancestral diet? And even if they end up having to eat it, they did have, they used wheat flours, but that wasn't, genetically modified. So that was not going to cause any gut issues to begin with. And the second thing is they mainly focused on good fat and meat. And when she did that, I mean, she made a humongous difference in terms of her health. I mean, those are things that I looking at, like where you came from, and then as well as what you tolerate, and then how can we improve that overall dietary function?
Yeah. So I've interviewed plenty of people on my channel, and also I've read on Rivero.com, which is the ultimate, I guess, carnivore website.
Dr. Baker, I love it. I love his work.
He's amazing. He's one of the main reasons why I started learning about carnivore and eventually became a carnivore. So yeah, I mean, Crohn's, IBS, IBD, complete resolution just by doing carnivore. You never hear about that in traditional mainstream medicine. It's always about, they give them the complete opposite, right? It's like, eat more fiber. And you never hear about resolution or remission. You just hear about, improving symptoms just a little bit. Whereas when you go back to a carnivore diet, it happens all the time, complete reversal. So why aren't we studying these cases? Why aren't we formulating the hypotheses to do those studies, right?
So one of the books that I would recommend you doing is Dr. Jack Wolfson. So Wolfson, Dr. Wolfson. He's a doctor of osteopathy. He's a board certified cardiologist. He has a book called Paleo Cardiology. And that's basically it is. He focused on, his wife is a chiropractor, turned him into what he is right now. And his entire book is focusing on mainly in terms of reversing cardiovascular disease by adding an additional protein and fat, healthy fats, and looking at more paleo base. So he used that in his practice all the time. I use it all the time. And that's how I got my health back. So
I'm so curious because I feel like we think so much alike. I'm curious, why do you continue to leave some amounts of plants, given that you know about oxalates, even like sweet potatoes, right? They still have oxalates in them.
A little bit, not as much as, what you'd be getting out of a kale and such.
Yeah, of course. So why do you feel like it's because of the fiber? Do you feel like you're not convinced about the fiber thing?
I'm more of a balanced approach. I'm not a more extreme or the other. I think carnivore is helpful as a tool. I think it's still extreme to a lot of patients dealing with gut issues sometimes because they still need the pre-fiber to actually help to feed the bacteria. So in certain cases, I do end up to eat it as such, but mainly, I try to avoid it as much as I can.
Okay, so that's what it is, I guess, is what I'm understanding, is that you feel like you still need the fiber as a prebiotic to feed the probiotics.
Yes.
And that's the thing is, I can only tell you my philosophy, right? Because I don't have the studies and because nobody's bothering to fund the carnivore studies. And so there's this one that came out of Harvard that showed amazing results, but we need so much more, and we need to actually do the randomized control trials and try to elucidate the mechanisms, because it's the only way our dietary guidelines would ever change. So, but it's fine. I'm not gonna push you on that.
Yeah, because I have one of my friend, Sarah, she's a dietitian. She works for a bioaccelerator, she used to have severe gut issues as well, but she's a complete vegan that she was able to turn things around. So
Wow.
it's depending on the patients. And even if you decide to go 100% carnivore, it's just a tool, right? The food itself is a tool, and you haven't fixed the root cause issue. And this is a key things I want to leave people with. Yes, you could do carnivore diet, right? But if there's an underlying issue, let's just say you have a particular toxin getting exposed, biotoxins like mold toxicity, including parasites, or there's a overgrowth of certain pathogenic bacteria like enterococcus, you're not fixing anything, right? And then if the carnivore diet is actually helping you to suppress the overall inflammatory markers and you have lesser symptoms or no symptoms still existing, it's just that the carnivore diet was able to at least put that into remission. But if you get rid of that carnivore diet, it's going to come back very, very quickly. So my focus is that you should look at the root cause issue, get the right testing done if you could afford to do so, work with the right professional that does all these things, and then really get to the nitty gritty, right? You want to build your body's resiliency. That's one of the things that I always recommend patients to do. Yeah, you're going to be end up having, as long as you live in this earth, you're going to be exposed to toxins all the time, right? You cannot be living in a clean environment. We're supposed to live with toxins. We're supposed to live with bacteria and fungi and parasites and such. But if you keep on freaking out about the overexposure, you're not living your life. And you want to build up a resiliency so this way, when a zombie apocalypse comes, you can survive. Right? So these are the things that I would like to teach people in doing so.
You sound like my hubby. When the apocalypse, he's always prepared.
You know, with all that's happening for the last 2 weeks, I think we're close to there. I mean, it's been crazy, but
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just have 3 things that if you can touch on that before I let you go.
We can do it for 3 hours if you want to.
Oh, thank you. No, I know. I'll let you. I'm actually, today is the first day of my cycle. And normally in the past, when I used to eat even keto, I wouldn't be able to do anything. I would have to cancel everything. I'd have cramps. I would be completely like non-functional human being. And it's only recently, the last few months, I feel like over time, because I've just been eating more and more meat, over time, over a period of months, I guess it takes for those symptoms to start happening, that now I am completely normal. Like, you wouldn't even know that it's my first day. Like last month on the first day, I went to the gym, I did leg presses, you know, I'm doing an interview, anything like it used to be slightly stressful, like public speaking or whatever, I couldn't do it. And so this is just another like amazing benefit of eating good food and doing that consistently, you know?
And
so
even you know, high amounts of protein is needed for women to produce healthy amounts of hormone. You know, I've seen patients deal with hormone dysfunction, and majority of times they have a very poor protein and fat intake. Yeah,
I agree 100%. Okay, so the only things that I think I really, really want you to touch upon, because I do have a client with Epstein-Barr virus. So I want to see your take on that, given that you had a personal experience, Bartonella infection, and then what test would you recommend, like a lipoprotein fractionation test, maybe like the high sensitivity CRP, you know, just a test for people who are always worried about high cholesterol and their primary care physician wants to put them on a statin. Like, what would you recommend they do? So yeah, those things.
Yeah, so testing is very simple. So there are advanced cardiac marker testing that you can order. So I like Boston cardiac testing, and that's like around $225. You get a full blood analysis looking at different inflammatory markers, looking at advanced breakdown of the lipids, including ApoB. And so that's one thing is worthwhile spending money, and that's what I do. And some insurance companies do cover for that, almost 100%. So look into that, ask for it. Also, second thing is I think you should work with, or the people out there should work with, a integrated cardiologist. They're board certified cardiologists, MD or DO, but they have an integrated model to look at the cardiac issue in a bigger picture. So that's one thing that I would recommend doing. The third thing you had mentioned about was Epstein-Barr.
Epstein-Barr virus and Bartonella infection.
So Epstein-Barr, is very prevalent. 70% of the population have Epstein-Barr virus in their system, right? It's called mono. We're exposed very, very early on.
70%?
Unfortunately, yeah, 70% of the population actually have it. But some people don't even have any symptoms at all, right? It's like cytomegalovirus. What is there?
Cytomegalovirus.
Cytomegalovirus. I mean, some people actually have it. It's completely stay dormant. So you don't have to worry too much about it. It's symptomatic is something. But again, it's all about your microbiome ecosystem in terms of what you're able to have, how well you're able to balance things out based on the immune system. And that's the thing. Your immune system has to be strong enough. Unfortunately, because of stress, inflammation, exposure to toxins and such is causing a dysfunctional immune imbalance, which is resulting in a overexpression of Epstein-Barr. So that's what you see in terms of the chronic fatigue issues and all the things that the patient might be dealing with. And when you see the after effect of COVID, end up having to re-trigger Epstein-Barr issues to be flaring up. And that's the reason why people have these long haul issues on top of other co-infections. But that's the same thing. COVID, and we've seen numerous studies so far, that actually suppresses the expression of the B and T cells, right? So that's the reason why you end up having to have a uprising or the actual re-triggering of the Epstein-Barr to occur. So what should you be doing? Well, one, you have to test and then see what your overall status is. And two is you need to change your diet. If you keep on eating high sugar filled diet, that's going to cause more flare up of the immune system. So again, paleo or mitochondrial supporting diet like paleo or keto based, that's what I would recommend doing. Followed by, I like using angiographis as a particular herb.
Okay.
Angiographis. I'll put that in the comment box.
Okay. That's a supplement, an herb?
It's an herb. And then also reishi mushroom. Reishi mushroom spores has been shown to, and there's a lot of studies looking at the spore portion of the reishi mushroom able to suppress the Epstein-Barr expression, right? So mushrooms end up having to come into play to balance out your whole ecosystem within your microbiome, and then having to work on your immune system to suppress that overall virus. So whenever I actually have it, I still have it. I still have sometimes if I don't get enough sleep or I have a lot of stressful, projects I have to get through, Epstein-Barr do end up having to come with the vengeance, but I know how to, take care of that very early on, nip it in the bud, and then I get to do what I need to do.
How can you tell when it's back?
I get really fatigued. I get severely fatigued. I'm like, oh my God, I'm real run down. So that's when so again, you got to be very intuitive about your body. Listen to your body. Your body tells you a lot. So, but we're so busy with our, things that are happening on a daily basis that we forget to listen to our body. But just like close your eyes, just feel how you feeling. That's when you're able to, when you're basically one with your body and then figure things of that nature. Third thing is you want to get adequate amount of sun exposure, or at least to get the adequate amount of vitamin D level. If your vitamin D level is less than 30, 40, you have a trouble issue right there. So you want to get vitamin D level up. You could take about 4,000 to 5,000 units a day, and you could probably take even more during the winter. But here's a problem right now. Some people, depending on their exposure to toxins, their vitamin D receptor has been degraded or not function at all. As a result, they can't convert that well, nor do they actually have a receptor that's working so well. And so sometimes adding in a sun exposure for about 15 to 20 minutes will do a better trick in terms of getting the adequate amount of vitamin D.
Yeah.
Another thing is if you're dealing with inflammation, your B6 and your magnesium gets completely depleted as well. So you want to add those two supplements together.
Love it. Yeah. And also I would add, because I've done a 23andMe genetic test and it shows that just genetically, I don't have enough vitamin D receptors, or like they don't function as great as somebody else. And so I always have to overdo it basically with the vitamin D to make sure I have a good range in my blood.
Yeah, absolutely. So even looking at toxins right now, that kind of goes well with the DNA. Well, your toxin exposure, especially the mycotoxin, mold toxins, block the vitamin D receptor. So is it the genetic issue, or is it the overall expression of the toxins changing your epigenetic profile to be as such?
Interesting.
Right?
That
Right?
would make total sense too. Down regulating your vitamin D receptors in a way.
Yep. And so in those patients, you don't want to over challenge them with additional vitamin D. Whenever I see patients where the vitamin D level is not increasing, especially they're looking at the 25-hydroxy, but the calcitriol level is actually increasing, you don't want additional vitamin D. Actually, matter of fact, it's going to cause a immune downgrade of the immune system. It actually causes a immune dysfunction, giving additional vitamin D. So there's a work by Dr. Robert Novier in comparing inflammatory process versus a healthy response. In an inflammatory process, your vitamin D level gets blocked, and then it causes an inflammatory condition by adding additional vitamin D. So when you actually have like Lyme disease or mold toxins and such, you suspect that your vitamin D level is not increasing. Instead of doing vitamin D, get sun exposure is one. And then two is you want to get the toxin or the issues identified and then treat that problem.
Amazing. And finally, Bartonella infection.
Bartonella infection. Well, that is a vector-borne illness that could come from flea or lice, even tick bite. Even spiders actually carry it. And it's a very prevalent intracellular infection that is very hard to identify. The reason being is, one is intracellular, is very hard to grow in the lab. And so you have to use a very specific lab companies to really identify it. One of the lab companies I do recommend is using IGenix, is IGENIX, and they do a fluorescent institute testing to looking at the qualitative aspect of, not quantitative. So you're able to see exactly that the pathogen is identified, and that's one of the key lab tests I recommend doing. And then in terms of being that's also intracellular, it does end up having to affect the endothelial tissue, like what I had to deal with. So it can cause major issue dealing with cardiac issues, so heart failure, heart attack, atherosclerotic buildup, definitely changes the electricity within the cardiac muscle as well. So those are privately seen. But one of the things that's really interesting is that Bartonella has been shown to cause major severe issue dealing with mental health problems, so schizophrenia, OCD, anxiety issues, and such. So there was a study that was done, that was 2004. They looked at homeless populations in LA, and about 80% of them actually had Bartonella infection.
Wow.
So if you're looking at the prevalence of the homeless and the overall mental health issues they're dealing with, is it the fact that there's an infection going on, it's not being treated, right? And then if you actually have a heavy crowded area, and I talked about fleas and lice, those arthropods end up having to transfer these particular disease to other people. So those are the common things that actually occur. So when you have any suspecting of this particular issue like this, intracellular, you can't be hitting these infections with antibiotic or after that, because antibiotic itself does not really treat the intracellular infection as much. So the key things that they use is azithromycin, which is a Z-Pak, on top of Mepron, which is called atovacone, to help deal with these things. It will suppress the overall infection, but it doesn't really get rid of it. So you have to looking at the intracellular infection. Secondly, also biofilms. We didn't talk about biofilms right now, but when you're dealing with pathogens, they're smart. They like to protect themselves. What they're going to do is they're going to try to form this film around their body to prevent other things like immune system, and as well as the antimicrobial agents to kill them. They're evolving. And Bartonella is a very smart little bug. They evolve. They hide within your intracellular and within your cells. As a result, your immune system is not able to fight it off, and then certain therapies do end up having to fail. So some people may end up having to say it's a chronic issue, good thing, and I'm lucky to say this, is that for 8 years so far, I've been Bartonella free after the treatment was done properly.
And this is what the treatment you just laid out, that's what you did?
Yeah, well, I did a lot more. I did a lot more back in 2015 to 2017, but luckily I didn't use any antibiotic to get rid of the Bartonella infection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, John. I am so happy we finally got to connect, and we talked about such an important topic, and how can somebody at 33 years of age actually have heart disease. And so I'm so glad that pushed you on this journey that you're in right now. And I'm so grateful for your content. And I hope in the future we do another IG Live. Maybe we'll do another one where we'll take actual questions, because I know there are so many questions, but I
know we didn't have enough time. I will. Yeah, let's do another one next week or something. But I'd love to do your Q&A. If you want to have a Zoom meeting of some sort, I'd be happy to do that as well. But I think one of the things that people should be doing is to empower themselves to be their own best doctor.
Exactly. You can't rely on authority figures anymore, unfortunately, knowing how they've been captured by the corporate interests, and they've been captured by the food companies and the pharmaceutical companies. And then you've got the hospital systems and the insurance companies. They all benefit from the state that we're in. And so it really hijacks the objectivity of our health experts. Unfortunately, it's not right. It shouldn't be able. They shouldn't. They should have their own minds, and they should have more ethics than that. But it's happening. So you gotta be your own. Just be your own advocate and do your own research.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, John. Where can people find you and work with you?
Well, obviously. They could, follow me right now. There's a drop-down menu. You can just follow me anytime. And then if you want to work with me, there's a link in my bio to do a discovery call. And I do a 30-minute discovery call and figure out if you're a good fit. We also do a deep dive into what your issues are, and then talking about what potential labs, or if I'm not able to help you, then I could at least recommend some other practitioners that you could work with. But that's the thing. There's so many information available on the internet, especially IG, that people do need good direction. And I'm here for that and helping to guide them through.
Fantastic. And I'm going to remind you to save it, because I couldn't do it on my end. So you're going to have to save it at the end of the live.
Oof,
and that way, and then after you save it, it'll go on your feed, and then I think you have to download it. I'm gonna try and see if I can download it so that I can have the whole video file, so I can post it on my YouTube channel. If not, you would have to download it and just email it to me as like a Google Drive link or something like that.
Yeah, email it, or I would use there's something called WeTransfer.
Oh yeah.
You can actually transfer up to 2 gigabytes. So hopefully this works. Yeah.
Fantastic. That way, because I know a lot of people want to watch this again, and more people also on YouTube can get to watch it, and I'll make sure I'll link all of your information in the description box below. So yeah, thank you so much, John, and until we do another live soon enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a wonderful time spending with you. We actually went a lot longer than I expected, so this is great.
I know. Yeah. I had to extract all your knowledge. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do another one very soon.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.